Hello, my name is Morgan Prygrocki. I'm part of our pro video team here at Adobe, and I'm thrilled to be chatting with Viridiana Lieberman today, who's just been nominated for Best Documentary for The Perfect Neighbor.
She's always messing with people's kids. Oh yeah. Barely ever seen it. I'm like the perfect neighbor.
Why don't you tell everybody listening in what The Perfect Neighbor is about and how does it feel to be at this stage of the journey with this project?
The Perfect Neighbor is a feature documentary. It's primarily told through body cam footage and all kinds of evidence, dash cam, ring cams, 911 calls. And it's about this neighborhood dispute in Ocala that simmered to a boil and ended tragically. People have never kind of seen a film built completely out of evidence. And we wanted to do that to make it undeniable. I think this journey has kind of blown my mind the most with how many folks it's reached and the work it's already doing. So very, very proud of that. And here's hoping whatever comes down the road with the shiny things, but ultimately we feel like we've already won.
Walk us through your journey as an editor. Have you always been drawn to documentaries? Have you dabbled in other genres? How did we end up here?
What a great question, because when I graduated film school, the one thing I said I knew I didn't want to do was documentary. At the time, I didn't feel like documentaries were as immersive and cinematic as I kind of fantasized in storytelling. And I hadn't kind of been stung by the powerful social justice activism bug just yet. I loved editing in college. I was like one of the things that I was drawn to. There was something about putting things together and finding the order, seeing a path and trying things. I had a friend, a wonderful filmmaker, Cheryl Fragenic, who was directing a film. It's on HBO. It's called Back on Board, Greg Louganis. And I was like, I need a gig. Let me edit. She said, you've never done a doc before. You're a little green. So she hired me as an archival researcher. So I started there and I was an assistant editor. And then my first film that I got a full editing credit on was called I Am Evidence. And it's directed by Geeta Gambhir, the director of The Perfect Neighbor. So she was right there at the beginning and saw the potential, gave me the chance, believed in me. And it's kind of incredible because now documentary, as an editor, I think it's one of the most thrilling places to be in cinema. There's so much discovery in the edit. You know, I mean, people give me a mountain of footage, 10 years of footage, you know, even with The Perfect Neighbor, right? This type of material that was never meant to be used in this way. And now you're kind of set with the challenge to, yes, build a narrative, but also evoke emotion, you know, like build suspense and do work, issue-oriented real-world work.
The storytelling with real footage is the most visceral experience ever. There's got to be mountains of footage and audio to cull through. How did you get involved with this project and what did that process look like?
Geeta and I have done a handful of projects together, so we built a lot of trust over the years. She knows what I love to do and why I love to do it, and she creates the space for me to do my best work and take big swings. And this is a personal film for Geeta. You know, as a family friend who died, I was, of course, highly honored that she would come to me with such personal work. And at the same time, so like fired up for the challenge of, because she kind of said, you know, I think we can just do it out of these materials. And I was like, we will, we will. And I was very strict. I held us to it, very strict. There were times where everybody kind of, is it working? Can it work? You know, I mean, you really had to dig your heels in and stick with it, you know, and stand by this idea and trust the audience, follow the footage, you know, don't force it to be something it's not. So all these things that I feel like I had been screaming into a void sometimes on projects over years came into play with this one. There wasn't actually that much. I mean, there was only 30 hours of footage, which is actually nothing for editors, which is a challenge unto itself to then kind of cull through. But you know, the calls were the challenge because they ranged anywhere from 30 minutes to 3 hours. The goal of it is to present the evidence. So you want these calls to feel real time. You want them to have a 360-degree view of what happened on that call, what new information was learned, hearing all the sides. So it's really kind of how to embrace the lens and, you know, maximize it, but also make it try to feel as personal as we can. And although the police, we have now opened up such nuanced conversations about the police, it's not about them. You know, they are the lens. Ultimately, that was able to be a guiding factor to make a lot of choices. It wasn't about procedure. You know, it was about the people. It was about the neighbors and being with them. So it was a very big challenge, but the biggest challenge of it was the responsibility. Anything you see in the film is synced to the sound that was with that camera. Because I was like, this is evidence. Like I can't, we have to make it undeniable. And we're just showing the facts, but we obviously have to make choices.
What was your process like for organizing all of the material? Did you start with everything ready to go, or is this something where you were getting more and more footage over time as you were editing?
No, everything was ready to go. Gita strung out, she had strung everything out. And then we had to sync it all and kind of layer all of the police and where they were, and then where the calls come in, ring cams, dash cams, all of that. But it was all organized in a pretty classic way by date, because we knew the film was going to be chronological. Every time I come into a project, it's a case-by-case basis on organization. It's like, well, what is the story? Is it personal? Is it theme-based? Is it time-based? And with this one, knowing that we were going to have to stick to chronology was like, all right, I just want to know what date, what order all these calls happened. And then ultimately all the materials that go within that time span in there. They were all strung out. And then it was kind of about cutting them down and just slowly honing until that balance kind of worked throughout. And I didn't multicam or anything with this one, even though I've done that before, because I was like obsessive. It's not that I didn't trust multicam. I just wanted to see it all on the timeline. So my timeline was like, in some ways very simple and in some ways very elaborate. When we got to the third act and we break out of the body cam footage, that was a moment where, okay, we're going to how do we stay in this lens? How do we stay in a lens that kind of feels like it's outside looking in? So we're introducing new elements, but they still feel in the fabric of the visual language of the film, even though we've kind of been living in body cam. So there were like very strict rules that we stuck to. And in the organization of the project, it kind of like set those rules by me knowing what the source was and what day it was from. And then it was just about sticking to the truth.
Were there any scenes that were particularly challenging to cut?
There's two things that I'll say to that. So the one is the night where it happens. Because I mean, there are times there were 12 to 15 cops on the scene, and they come onto this and they turn it on and then they turn it off. And it's kind of a little haphazard of when they're recording. But you also have all the ring cams and the 911 calls and then the canvassing interviews. So there were a lot of elements happening at the same time. And knowing where to be and how to condense time in that while still saying the truth. So that was a challenge. That whole sequence was quite a challenge. But some of the hardest cuts in this film were the most simple. It was like when a cop would they'd enter a scene, get out of the cars, and they're walking around. And one would do something like he'd walk in the wrong direction and take a real long loop around. But I've got to make it like they just need to get there. They got to get where they're going. And it was fascinating that the simplest cuts kind of were the hardest to be able to make it feel real time. But that became almost a bigger challenge than kind of where am I when all the action's happening. There was one cut in particular where a cop took a very long detour. And for some reason, that cut eluded me for a long time.
Were you in touch with any of the neighbors or the family members that were affected by this? Did they help guide or weigh in on some of how the story came together?
No, we didn't have any of the neighbors or the family be a part of the editing process. We definitely kind of cut the whole film and we showed it to them. That was an important step, particularly Pamela Dias, Ajika's mother. We made this independently. And then we took it to Sundance and Netflix bought us. So there was this period of time before we knew if we got into Sundance where we had locked picture and we were just like, the film is the film. Either people are going to get it or they're not. We stood by that vision. But there was also a moment where we showed it to Pam and we said, if you don't want this out in the world, it goes away, like poof, gone. We'll just shelve it. And it was so important to her that the world bear witness to this and the work it can do. And the neighbors had the same, they were very emotional about it and watching it and processing it, but they also were so glad it existed to make sure this doesn't happen again. So all of that did happen after the process. But Gita, having this be a family friend and having it so close, there was enormous sensitivity the entire time about what we were doing and what choices we were making. And Pam continued to say, yes, this is the work we wanted to do.
Tell me a little bit about your process getting this film into Sundance. What did that submission process look like? And what was the response like at Sundance last year?
The one thing that was a bit of a race for us was the trial. Because, we made the film without the trial and all in it. And we didn't think the trial was going to happen in time, which was fine because our film was not contingent on whatever the outcome of the trial was. It was about showing you the events that led to that moment. So we watched the trial for 4 days. the outcome happens. We were like, what do we do? And I had always had this fantasy, and I don't know what it really meant, but I wanted to be a part of a film that had active storytelling from the opening frame to the end. Like it was continuous to the very end. And then all of a sudden I was like, oh my gosh, we're chronological, we're evidence. Why wouldn't we just put the trial at the end if we can find a tasteful way to put the credits over it, but make it active scene work? And the film's end will actually be the conclusion of the story. So we did that. But cutting down a 4-day trial in like a day, I think I did it in like maybe 2 days. That was a bit of a race before we submitted to Sundance. But then once we submitted, and we got accepted. That was incredible. I was a kid who grew up dreaming about Sundance. Like the Oscars, of course, we all think about the Oscars, but I was like an indie kid. I mean, I wanted to like make movies with my friends in shopping carts as dollies and go to Sundance. Like that was the dream. So to get to go there with The Perfect Neighbor in 2025 was really special. And the response was so incredible. I mean, everybody got it. And that was so validating.
We always like to wrap up our interviews with words of advice. What are some of the things that you wish you had known at the beginning of your career, and what pieces of advice would you give anybody listening in?
I mean, there's two sides to it. There's one where it's like all the things I wish I had heard, and then the other side of it's like I think I needed to go through all that for me to get where I had a lot of growing pains, and I think I needed them. I think the one thing I want to say though is right now in this time where things are starting to, get, for lack of a better term, a little formulaic. We're starting to feed the algorithm, the expectations of what we think can sell and cannot. And I think there's a thirst for specificity. And as editors, I think the thing that you can do best is find your voice. And that means theme, that means style, that means all the things. And embrace the thing that only you can take. Specificity, singular work. Because I think right now, not only does the world need it, but it could feel highly empowering. If you walk on a project going, oh, I can't wait to show them what I'm going to bring to this. I can't wait to tell, and not kind of come on and be like, oh gosh, am I going to give them what they want? It's like, no, you're there for a reason. They chose you because of what you do. And if you're early in your career, then your goal is to kind of figure out what those things are that you bring and that you love to do, and tell people what you want to do, tell people how you like to do it, tell people what you think is feeling right and what isn't. And for me, things are very personal to me in a good way. And not in the like, I won't take offense when I get notes. I don't take that personally. But I do care a lot about the films I'm on and the people I work with. And I think you can feel it. You can feel it when you watch a film that's made with love. And so I take a lot of pride. And from the very beginning of my career, I cared a lot. And sometimes that ate me alive. And sometimes it made what I was doing feel very special. So beyond the technical stuff, that's like, just keep doing it, play with footage, learn the program. It's not really, Premiere is incredible as a place to be. And at the same time, it's like, as long as you just know how to work that program, you don't have to know everything about it. The real skill is the instincts, the storytelling, the approach. And then you have all these incredible tools that can help you bring that to life. But it's just working that muscle more than anything. Every time I meet a young editor and I have the privilege of mentoring people, I get so excited to give them the biggest pep talk I can that they can ask for things, that they can say how they work, that they can create the conditions to do their best work, and that they can have a voice at the table. And that's really kind of what makes what we do so special.